Hi, guys, and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast, where life is story. I'm Dominic Domingo, your host, and I'd like to bring in Virginia Grenier, our co-host and producer extraordinaire.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. And I'm just going to do some of our real quick, little promo at the beginning. So first, we want to say that it's, great to have our listeners with us today. And we're excited about, of course, of our interview, but we just want to take a moment and thank you, all of our wonderful listeners and supporters, and your continued support sharing our podcast to help us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please consider rating and reviewing us on your favorite platforms and share the podcast with family and friends. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds. And then for more enriching conversations and insights, of course, always subscribe to us at Language of the Soul podcast on buzzsprout.com. You can, of course, follow us on social media. And of course, we are working to get our Patreon community up and going for updates and exclusive content. But your continued support helps us by bringing those important stories to life. So if you can, find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio.
Wow, that was good.
Yes,
You
anywhere
just rattled
else.
through all of them. I love that.
Yeah, and any of the other ones. And if you'd like to support us further, of course, obviously consider joining us on Patreon, and then any donation helps because this is a labor of love.
Awesome. Yeah, that's an understatement. It's definitely, yeah, it feels great. It's definitely on a volunteer basis at this point, but it feels great. It's very much our contribution, and it keeps us on the straight and narrow too, right? Wasn't it? It's such a great reminder. Like even this morning's episode, it's just inspiring. I think we learn from our guests every week.
Yes, yes. And I've actually ran into a few people. I didn't mention this last time, but one's a colleague of mine. And then, of course, I've run into other people within my community from, us sharing it out there on social media and stuff and, spreading the word ourselves. And everybody has come back and has told me that has listened to an episode that they walk away going, I
Mm.
know that you weren't talking specifically to like my circumstance in life, but I was able to listen to what you guys were saying with your guest, or the two of you, meaning you, Nick, and me,
Mhm.
bantering back and forth on like a thought or something. And they're like, I could relate that to a circumstance in my life.
Mhm.
And that was so empowering.
I love hearing that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was very powerful to hear.
I love
So
that. Yeah. One hopes, I do think storytelling is universal, as we were saying in the last episode, right?
Mhm.
It's universal by, or can be universal by
Yeah.
nature. And so I feel that way. I feel like it's all relatable and it's all universal. But sometimes, it's theoretical until you actually have the experience. But anyway, I do love hearing that. I remember the first time somebody I didn't know, what was it? Like somebody that I didn't plug my book to, or
Mhm.
just found it and read it, and it was a friend of mine, and discovered it on their own, and that meant a lot to me, and
Yeah.
they actually liked it, which was icing on the cake. Anyway, thank you for fitting that in, and I guess without further ado, because we're very excited about today's guest, but full transparency, we sometimes have two guests back to back, which is awesome. We ride momentum and or ride on fumes sometimes when it's too
Right.
condensed, but it is inspiring. Just it's a whirlwind. So unfortunately, I didn't get to go as far down the rabbit hole as I normally would researching our second guest today. I joke like I do nothing short of stalking my guests, and I watch pretty much everything that's ever been put on the interwebs, whether it's other podcast interviews or, blog appearances or whatever, any kind of coverage. I tend to find it, which is ominous. But I just couldn't do that this time. So pretty much Virginia is going to man the interview because she had a little more time to check out Pepper Ann, which is today's guest.
Yes.
And yeah, without further ado, I'm going to read her bio, and then Pepper Ann, who's in the green room, when I finish, you can correct me on anything I might get wrong. That's how we roll here at Language of the Soul. Okay, Pepper Ann is a seventh generation Texan, where she and her family currently reside. She's diligently worked with private investigators, which helped flush her narratives with detailed excellence in her true crime books. She's protected her identity because there are people not too happy that she published her first book, The Notorious Texas Swindler, warning her to stop and hacking her computer. But she refused to give up. Her life and her family's lives were even put in jeopardy. This only put more resolve into her to continue writing the truth of what happens. Pepper's goal is to bring the real story behind the stories we've all heard about. She's making sure that we hear all sides to the story so that we can make our own decisions of right and wrong and justice. While her ultimate focus is and always will be true crime, some stories are too hidden to bring to light, which is why Peppers decided to also dabble in writing crime fiction, where stories are inspired by actual events. Welcome, Pepper Ann.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for having me on your show today. I'm just excited to be here. And
Well,
yes, you got my bio correct.
Okay. All
good.
right.
We're glad that we did, and I'm excited to have you on here because true crime is definitely one of those things that's close to my heart. Being somebody that worked in public safety for a number of years, and and then of course being in clinical mental health, I really like forensic psychology. So I always like the reasons behind things. So when you reached out to us and kind of was sharing, I was very excited. But I do have to say, to me, just in the research I've done, I thought it was amazing the perseverance that you've had with telling the truth. It's facing threats, uncovering, story, a story that has to do with your own family. To me, that's just a testament to the power of resilience and determination on all levels. And then I love the fact too, when I was looking into the, and we'll touch on this, but you go into themes of justice and empathy and the complexities of human nature, which obviously resonate with everything we talk about here at Language of the Soul. So, with
Mhm.
that said, I know the story has to do with Bob um, Lynch, and the story, as Dominic mentioned, you faced some threats. Through doing your own investigative work. And I would love for you to kind of share with us any insights you gained about human nature during your research while facing that complexity of people basically, trying to stop you.
Well, I'll share several things with you. When I was working on this project, when I was doing the research, I found a lot of people who believed in me and really supported me. And
Hmm.
I want to put light on those individuals first and foremost, because there were times when it became so dangerous what I was trying to expose that my family, the lug nuts were loosened on on some of our vehicles. So these individuals were trying to get
Wow.
me to stop, but my family just kept pushing me forward and saying, "No, you have to tell the story." So it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing when you find your passion and it's something that you end up finding out that you're really good at. And
Hmm.
the people that support you believe in you. And those are the people that I could not, I couldn't ask for a better group of people to support me and be around me. So, human nature, as far as the good in people, I saw a lot of good. I saw a lot of bad, but I saw more good than I did bad. The more that I began to expose, I started to see the dangers and the people who are criminally minded, and they
Hmm.
would go to any length to protect themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's so hard too in a situation like that because, you have to look beyond that black and white kind of perspective too, because, you're trying to tell a story and stuff, which is the other thing too, because, here we believe in the healing power of storytelling and going into the experiences of the victims of the crimes that I only got to skim your book. I didn't get to dig deep into it, but to me that shows that you're not just there to share the story, but you're also listening, which is so profound for that emotional trauma recovery.
Or their
So
catharsis, right?
yeah, and their catharsis. So how does sharing their stories help those victims heal, and how what impact did it have on you? What did it leave you with?
Well, I was not there when all of the crimes happened. In other words, I didn't know that Bob and I were related to each other. We're cousins, and I had no idea we're related. So once I found out and I began to uncover everything, I was I was upset. I was upset at the idea that I was related to someone who would do the things that he
Mm,
did.
mhm.
Hmm.
And once I started interviewing the victims, I became very close to them. And I saw a healing with them. In fact, the family members of, I write about a standoff, an 8-hour standoff at the very end of the book. And it was when Bob and another offender who had escaped the Grayson County Jail were holding a married couple hostage in their home for 8 hours. And Bob ended up working with the authorities to release the couple. And once I started interviewing this family, and Vincent and Irma, that was the name of the married couple. They've since passed. But when I started interviewing them, I saw a healing. In fact, their family even told me that they saw a healing with Vincent. I think he needed to talk to someone. He needed to be able to talk about the trauma and everything that happened. There was a healing for me as well because I learned that we all everyone has the chance to make right and wrong decisions, and
Mm.
Bob had made some bad decisions, but one of the best decisions he made was to release Vincent and Irma. And Vincent and Irma were very they corresponded with Bob towards the very end of their lives.
Wow.
And Vincent, um with him, the healing, it I can't talk about them as much as I'd like to because I tear up. I mean, they're family to me, but Vincent would always go into the details and he would tell me, "Don't be so hard on Bob. Don't be
Mhm.
so hard on him because he made the best decisions he could out of the circumstances that he was in." And for
I have
me,
to jump in. I'm so sorry, but
it's okay.
Virginia, this is a good litmus test because I don't
Mhm.
know the story and I'm actually playing the part of the listener right now.
Mhm.
Uh, I have no idea what the story is. Is it a spoiler for you to give us a synopsis of the book? I don't know Bob. I don't know what the crime was. I know nothing. Can we just run that down, like what the book was about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
absolutely no idea. I love everything you're talking. I do love everything you're talking about, but I kind of am like, what happened? What is the crime?
I'm sorry, I probably should have started with that. Yeah. So actually, the individual that I wrote the story is about as a family member, and it's a story of his life. So he was involved in the Grayson County 5 jail escape in Sherman,
Which I should
Texas.
know. Is that the idea?
That's okay.
I don't
Um,
know it. Sorry.
that's okay. It's no worries. So I started with that. It's his most recent crime. So he and 4 other offenders escaped the Grayson County Jail
Mhm.
in 2001. And that's what caught my interest about the story. But the more that I dug into Bob's life, the more I began to learn of others that he was involved with who were corrupt. And I began to expose those individuals.
Mhm.
He is known as a cattle rustler. He has escaped jail twice. He married a woman who was involved in all types of. She had sex scandals and money laundering and all of these different crimes. And so he got caught up even more into the crimes with this other group of individuals, like I said, who I'm exposing. And the very last part, when it all came down and he got in trouble for the cattle rustling, he was the only one that got in trouble for that, and all the others are still out and about and play,
Mhm.
and they're still committing crimes today. But I interviewed individuals from um, when the Grayson County 5, when they all escaped the jail and the victims, and I spoke with them. And I tried to be as respectful to those individuals as I could because they went through a lot. I mean, and so it was important to me when I got the story to put it in their words. And I think I did the best I could. I did the best I could. I think I did a really good job. But yeah, so it's about a man who is notoriously known here in Texas for escaping jail twice and rustling cattle. And it's an amazing story, and it's somebody I'm related to. So
When did you
it's
when did you find out that you're related to him? Because I mean, obviously, you heard about his escape. You knew that he had done some really bad things out there. And so how far into your, investigative research when you were like, oh yeah, this is really interesting. I want to be in true crime. I want to be, investigating this particular story because obviously I live around here and I've been hearing about this person that you're like, oh wow, I'm related to him.
Actually, I'd never heard of the story until I was told I was related to him. He's
Oh,
a
okay.
family member. He is a black sheep of the family, and he was. I hate to say this, but he was the embarrassment. He was the one you don't talk about. You have a family member you don't. I hate to say it that way, but no one in the family ever really discussed. It's because they didn't know the full story. And one day I heard some family members talking. Some of the family, they were looking online at ancestry.com, trying to find out who we were related to. And I found out about Bob, and he is still alive. He's serving 14 life sentences in prison here in Texas. And so once I heard the story, I started digging around and I found out about the Grayson County Five, and that's how I found out about it. I learned about it 14 years ago when I decided to take the project on.
Mm,
I didn't know about him until then, and he didn't know about me either. We didn't know about the other one.
okay. But so you got to learn more about him probably through talking to those victims and kind of interviewing people and really just kind of, I mean, you can tell that their stories have touched you
Yes,
in a lot of ways. Do you feel like you've changed a lot from each individual you've encountered?
I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My heart goes out to these people. Um, they wouldn't talk to anyone else about their story. And they found out who I was, that I'm related to Bob, and they wanted to share their story with me. And I felt that it was important for me to write this book because I was telling all sides of the story. I was telling what happened I even had people who were criminals who committed crimes alongside Bob. They reached out to me and they wanted to tell me their story as well. So I interviewed a lot of people, from victims to perpetrators, family, friends, law enforcement. And I feel like I've grown so much. I feel like me writing the story was something that it was something that we all needed. I needed it. I needed to know that I could do this. I needed the confidence to know that I could tell the story, because it's my first book, you
Hmm.
know. And the victims, it was a healing for them. And then law enforcement. Let me tell you, when I was researching this, there was a magazine um, that they'd wrote an article about the Grayson County Five when they escaped the jail, and the person that wrote the article had called law enforcement Keystone Cops because it was here in Texas, and they were laughing and making fun of them. But they were not Keystone Cops. I interviewed the individuals in law enforcement, and when they found out that the inmates had escaped the jail,
Right.
they were working around the clock to bring them in. And so it was little articles like that that were written, that I wanted to put holes in. I wanted to show, hey, we need to show respect for these individuals in law enforcement. That was important to me because
No,
it
it's
was
not.
it was
Yeah,
it
no, it's
was just. I'm sorry.
no, no. I say no, and I can hear that passion in you, and I think that's one thing because I mean, there's definitely that attitude sometimes, and I know Dog always talks about the old tropes that we put on and stereotypes that we put on people, like these expectations or just like what societal norms are that we hear, we grow up hearing, kind of thing. And I kind of want to touch on that because I know, especially because you even talked about how there's people who were with Bob and stuff that committed crime and they reached out to you and wanted to tell their story. So I guess there's kind of this attitude out there that there's this perceived idea of how justice should be, and that rehabilitation is kind of one of those things like, oh yeah, but you got recidivism. And so do people really change? So I'm just kind of curious, hearing these stories, what's kind of your take on that perception of justice and rehabilitation in society, and what you've witnessed?
I believe that rehabilitation is a huge thing. I do believe some people can change if they're willing to. They have to want to. Let me say this. Um, Bob got in trouble in the 80s with a DPS state trooper, and he tried to get away from him and he couldn't. Someone in law enforcement, you don't expect that.
Mhm.
And when everything came down, it all ended. There were some individuals who paid Bob's bonds, and they paid his bonds and they would not get away from him. And these are the individuals I'm exposing. Um, they're very dangerous. And I've had other people who committed crimes with Bob, or they knew Bob during the time, and they said that these individuals would not let him go. The other criminals were even afraid of these people, and it's all in the book. Um, I believe that Bob, if there was a serious investigation done on these individuals who were involved in the crimes alongside him, if there had been a serious investigation, um, I believe that Bob would be able to maybe somewhat heal or be rehabilitated. Now, make no mistake about it, he is in prison and he should be in prison. But I believe for someone to be able to heal and to rehabilitate, I believe that they need to be able to move past, if if I can say that without in a disrespectful manner towards the victims. I believe in order for Bob to heal, there has to be a serious investigation done on these other individuals, because they're still reaching out to him today. Statements were made to him, letters were written, and I have them, and I even put them in the book. I sourced them in the book, of them telling him that they paid his bonds. And once he gets out of prison, because Bob, this is his second time to go to prison. He violated his probation with I'm sorry, parole, excuse me, he violated his parole when he met and married a woman that these individuals had sent to him to marry. And they were all tangled up. But the first time he was in prison, he received letters from them. And they were saying, when you get out, you're going to be under our thumb. You owe us all this because we paid your bonds. And so I feel like if someone would have taken this seriously, then maybe he would be able to rehabilitate. I don't believe he could be back out in society. I don't think that he should be back out in society. There are some individuals who are incarcerated and they are rehabilitated, and they deserve, once they serve their time, they deserve to be out.
Mhm.
Yeah, no,
But there's some that,
yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, and I think I think it's powerful and inspiring that, you want that truth to be exposed, especially for societal change. And I know it's something we talk about, change and transformation a lot. So what steps are you taking to ensure that those who are still running free are being held accountable for their actions?
I'm just trying to get the story out there.
Yeah, no.
I'll be honest with you. I feel like if the story gets out and enough people read it, somebody will take interest in it. And I'm
Mhm.
hoping that they would maybe take it a step further. That's the only thing I know to do right now.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that
yeah.
makes sense. And kind of thinking about like the whole fact that, you are, seeking that truth. And so I feel like someone who's on a quest like that, even though it's a quest for truth on this particular story and injustice that you're seeing in the world, I mean, I feel like it takes you to a deeper level of your own self-awareness. So have there been any personal, evolutionary mirrors that you've seen, anything that you'd say that's been a transformative power to your creative process? Like, what have you learned about yourself through investigating and writing the story?
Well, I think that it's given me more confidence in knowing that I can do hard things. We all have hard and difficult things in our life. And I've been through them. My family has been through them also. And I managed to hang in there and I kept going. I don't know that I would have been able to do all of these hard things if it had not been for this project. I mean, sometimes it's easier to walk away from something if it's difficult. A lot of people tell me, well, that's dangerous. I don't think I could have done it, but I hung in there. And I think one of the reasons I did is because it has to do with family. I met a lot of people who I had to keep going to get their story out. So I see that I can do it. I can do it. And I have a little more confidence, faith in myself. And I
Yeah.
think that's something we all need, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like your family and having their support during this journey has been a big, highlight and what you've been overcoming with, especially with the challenges. So we had somebody on a while back, and Dominic, I know you remember Johnny Tan, and he always talked
Mm.
about the influence of like nurturing that family connection. And I mean, he always talks about his like 9 moms, and they're all from different walks of life, and they're just women who have had that influential role. So I know he always talked about like how that helps you kind of cope and work through things. So what have you been doing and as a family unit to cope with those threats and challenges you've been facing?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I have a saying, and I've always said it the whole time. I would say it to Bob and to anyone else. If you don't want anyone to know what you're doing, you didn't have any business doing it in the first place. Those words came back to me yesterday and today by my family. Um, my mom had made this statement. She said, if these people didn't want anyone to know what they were doing, they shouldn't have done it. And you've exposed them, and you have to keep going. You don't stop. My family is amazing. We all support each other. We do the best we can.
Mm.
I have a loving family. I really do. And as far as how to deal with all of this, I think you just have to take it one day at a time. I
Hmm.
think that's the only advice I could give anyone. I hope no one is ever in the situation I'm in because it's been dangerous at times. Um, I've just been aware, and so is my family, of what's going on, who's around us. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the only answer that I have is you just have to keep going. You have to be careful. Um, I'm very fortunate that I have such a wonderful people around me, friends and family, even strangers. I would go into the grocery store, I'd have to I had to rewrite this thing 3 different times
Yeah.
because my life was deleted. And someone would hear the story, just a random stranger, and they'd say, "You have got to write this. You have a story to tell." So,
Yeah. Well, and I would say, and it's like you when you called Bob a black sheep of your family too. I mean, it's still a family member. It's still, I mean, obviously not like a legacy that you're going, oh yes, let's all live up to be this person. But I think it's important to know our family history to understand, all legacies, good, bad, indifferent. Um, kind of what's your thought on that? I mean, because you are, telling a story that is tied basically to your family's legacy, maybe not, always in a positive way, but there are lessons to pull away from it as well.
well, I guess maybe am going on the side of being a little naive, but I do believe everybody deserves at least a chance um, to change. Not everybody can, not everybody does. I've seen moments in Bob um, where he's made the wrong decisions and he knows he has. He's hurt people. And his rearing, he did not have a good rearing. Neither one of his parents stepped up. So I'm not blaming them.
Mhm.
I'm simply stating that sometimes we can't help our circumstances, but as we get older, we can make the right decisions. I think I'm always going to think that he might, that Bob might. He knows the difference between right and wrong, but
Mhm.
maybe someday he may sit down and realize I shouldn't have done that. It was wrong. My take on this is that we have to share whatever our family history is. We need to know about it. we ought to share it with people, um, and and just tell the story. Everybody has a story to tell. I mean, they do. Some go down, everybody goes down different paths. Some go down the wrong path, some go down the right path. But everyone's story, I think, deserves to be told.
Yeah.
Um,
I believe that too. I really feel like when and I think it helps bring us together because we realize that we're not as different from each other as we thought. I don't know if that's something that you've experienced as you've been, when you're working on your book, when you've talked to people, that you start realizing that there's a lot of parallels or, similarities to things in your life compared to their life. Did you ever walk away from anything where you like had like this kind of a epiphany moment when talking to somebody that you're just like, wow, I never thought about this before, but here it is in front of me.
yes, I did with Vincent. I'm telling you, the Foresters, that family has changed me so much for the better. They made me realize, Vincent did. He made me realize that you have to step back and look at the whole picture sometimes. You can't be so judgmental. And I was judgmental towards Bob. I would go visit him, and I would tell him at our visits, you knew better. You didn't have any business doing that. Sure, a lot of people. And Vincent, I think because Bob helped get them out of the house, Vincent viewed Bob differently.
Hmm.
Um, and so I learned from Vincent that you have to kind of look at all angles. You have to look at all sides. And I didn't do that before. I mean, I'm going into prison. I'm interviewing someone I'm related to. They're a hardened criminal. And I'm being told by one of the victims, you really need to not be so hard on them. Look at the whole picture. And so I think that was one of those moments for me. It's something that I'll always remember, to
Yeah.
just consider what everyone's been through before you make an opinion about them, before you know,
No, that makes sense to me because I know, like for me, especially like spending years in public safety, working as a victim advocate and stuff, I definitely saw like the harsh realities of basically the darker side of human nature some at many times. But it was definitely something for me, I know, to not get cynical, to not look at things in that light, like to realize like when I'm driving down the street and someone cuts me off, instead of just having a knee-jerk reaction to go, I wonder what made them feel like they needed to do that. What's going on in their life that they needed to cut me off and, almost cause a car accident. What are they speeding off to? And sometimes I think we forget to stop and do that, to really look at each other and go, you're a human being. You're not the product of the circumstances of which you were raised in or have chosen to live your life as. You there's more to you than what I'm physically seeing in front of me in this snapshot moment in time. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
it does. I couldn't agree with you more. I learned a lot from the people I interviewed. When I interviewed Sheriff Gary and some of the other deputies at Grayson County, one of the first things they asked me, after everything they went through trying to find Bob and all the others, they asked me, considering me, I know they were considering my feelings. How is Bob doing? How is Bob doing? I interviewed a lot of amazing people, and I don't know. I think writing this book has changed me so much for the better because I view things differently. I consider, like you said, if someone runs a stop sign or they're cutting you off or whatever, instead of getting upset, you think maybe they have an emergency. What are they going through? And I
Mhm.
experienced that exact same feeling
Do you,
researching and writing this book. Yeah.
do you feel like your empathy has gotten deeper too, with humanity and trying to put yourself in their shoes more now that
Yes.
I mean, especially because I mean when you're doing investigative type writing and when you're telling stories that are a nonfiction, truth reality versus when you're telling a story that's more symbolic because it's on a fictional or a mythological level. um I think it impacts you in a totally different way, even though it's similar in the process of trying to process through it. So what would you say would be one of like something that you've noticed you're more empathetic toward, or that um, when you're just out doing something that you see differently that you didn't before?
Well, I think one of the things is probably when I see someone in a rush or in a hurry, I stop and consider what are they going through. Do they, you know, we don't stop. I didn't. I don't know. Maybe others do. Um, if someone's in a rush, why are they cutting in front of me in the line? What's going on? You might step back. I know I have and think, is there something, an emergency or something? Because people do things sometimes without reason. If you're in a hurry, there's an emergency or something. So I consider people. I step back and I'm more watchful. I'm more considerate of people now. This book has changed me as far as my thinking. I'm not quick to rush with my thoughts and opinions. I'm more observant of
Hmm.
people. Um, I feel like I just feel like when someone you don't know what someone's going through in their life, and it's something I think we all need to kind of step back and remember. You know, I try to do that
Yeah,
more.
I totally hear you on that, and I get that. I know obviously laws are different in every state too. So in Bob's circumstances, I know you're saying he's serving quite a few different sentences. Sometimes people are like, oh, based off what they did, corporal punishment, death penalty, eh, being in the prison, you know, obviously interviewing him, but seeing the other inmates and the circumstances of what they're in. Is there anything that's been enlightening in that aspect too, that you know that's changed you, that's made you look at kind of the way we are, societal, in a societal environment of trying to, of course, keep people safe at the same time, again, making better choices so people have that opportunity for change.
Well, I think one of the things I've noticed, especially with TDC, now keep in mind the guards and the wardens and even the board members, everyone has been very kind and very professional with me because they know who I am. They know that I've been trying to work on this book and write it. So everyone on both sides of the law, they've all been very kind to me.
Hmm.
I have interviewed offenders who are incarcerated, and they have been equally kind to me as well. Everyone's been really kind to me, but there are some things that I've noticed within the system. I don't believe that there's a fair treatment of some of the individuals in TDC. It's not air conditioned. They don't have air conditioned units. There are
Hmm.
people that are dying and everything from the heat. I'm bringing this up because I think we have to give these individuals, as far as the sentencing goes, every case is different. It's gray. It's not black or white. Every situation is different. It really is.
Hmm.
As far as sentencing and this, that, and the other, if we're going to give people a chance to rehabilitate, we have to provide them with that opportunity. We have to give them what they need. And in other words, the proper classes that they need. They're just limited. They're limited to what they're allowed to do as far as rehabilitating. Um, I think that we have to be compassionate towards others.
Hmm.
Um, Going to prison, that's a punishment. We don't need to torture them once they're in there.
Right.
Um, so I'm telling you, this story has opened my eyes in so many different ways. I see individuals who've committed crimes, and I'm empathetic towards them.
Hmm.
I see the victims who were victimized. I'm empathetic towards them. I mean, I try to be more. I try to be kind and there's so many different people in the world. We have to just look at their situations. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a very tight line to walk.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. I mean, you have humanity on both sides of that scale, and
Yeah.
and it's so hard, it's so easy to put on the blinders and to just draw a judgmental conclusion. I mean, I know it's something that am I wrong, Nick? I mean, we try and look at the fact that, there's so many aspects to being a human, contributing to society, to allow people the opportunity to transform and to find the catharsis and the healing within our circumstances, be it something that has been biologically, physiologically, dealt upon us, or, just obviously agency of others upon you as well, or our own, that it's easy to lose sight sometimes. And that's one reason why I wanted to bring you on, because here you are, you're writing, you wrote a story that talks about stuff that can be seen very black and white, but it's not that simple. It's not so black and white. There's so much gray. And the reality is everybody is, plays a role. And yes, there needs to be accountability, but at the same time, there also has to be that forgiveness, the grace, and the allowance of healing for everybody involved, which is easier said than done. I think, that's one of the things I think not that we can solve that. I wish we could, all hold hands, sing kumbaya, and have world peace, but you can't. And so I'm just curious, what would be one of the most, probably, and it's probably such a loaded question. I know we tend to ask pretty hard, deep questions, but it's just because, we're trying to dig deep into, I, I'm going to say the human psyche for me, but that's just because that's where my mind goes. Nick, what would you say you would probably dig into? I know for him it's the catharsis, it's the transformative healing powers. So I'm just curious, like, can you share a moment with us where um, you felt that personal shift within you along those lines, where you felt that change in you, that I don't know. Like, I know I asked you about it and, an aha moment, but where, you're there, you're at the prison, and you saw somebody and you realize, wow, this could have been my brother, or this could have been my father,
Mm.
or this, I mean, even though I know you're with Bob, to go see who is a cousin, but, somebody else who is just not related to you, that you're like, wow, something to think about.
Yes, I can tell you exactly a moment when I realized what it was all about. Let me say before I get to that point, I used to believe in the death penalty. I did. I used to think, okay, they did it, put them in there. That's it. I don't believe that way anymore. That was a very ignorant way to think. Um, I didn't know. I always thought if someone did something bad, that's it. That's wrong. There are a lot of people who believe that way. Um, Once I took this project on, I went in and I started talking to individuals. There was one of the inmates who escaped the Grayson County Jail. Was at the same jail. He wasn't imprisoned because his charges were different when he escaped, and
Okay.
so he didn't end up in jail. He didn't end up in prison. Excuse me. The other four did.
Hmm.
He did serve time, but then he kept bouncing back into the same jail.
Okay.
And the sheriff and all the others, when I was researching for the book, they said, "Would you like to talk to him? You want to ask him about the escape?" And I said, "Sure." So I went in, and again, everyone was wonderful with me. They were professional. And I went in and I sat down and I started asking him questions, just simple questions. And I had my recorder going because I always record during my interviews with the permission of the person that I'm talking to. And I asked him, I said, um, what made you decide to do this? Why did you want to escape? And he broke down. He broke down in front of me. I
Mhm.
shut my recorder off. I could cry just thinking about it. And he said to me, I can't make it in society. I never learned how to do that. He
Mm.
said, I need to, I, he said, I never received rehabilitation. He said, when I'm out, um, I don't know how to function. And that was the minute I realized, okay, we need some change here. We need to do
Yeah.
something. And that's when I viewed everything completely different.
Yeah, no, and I can see that because I recently watched a show on Netflix, and I cannot remember the name of the show right now off the top of my head, but I know it was I can't remember if it was an actual, I think it was a jail. I don't think it was an actual prison. Um, where they took one of the cell blocks and they did an experiment. And I'm really looking forward to the next season. But the idea was is if the inmates did certain things, the idea was to give them, back a privilege. And what was interesting watching the show for me, at least on the clinical side of behavioralism and mental health, was when they would earn back a privilege. So the first one was like, hey, we're not, the guards are going to be outside the cell block versus inside. The doors are going to be open. You guys need, work as a functioning community.
Mm.
And so of course they had to figure that out. And a lot of them had been in there since they were kids. And it was like completely retraining their brains to like, okay, I have to learn to trust the other people here with me in this cell block. And it was interesting to watch that dynamic. So very similar you're saying, um and they were typically, I think it was like they were locked up except for like 1 to 2 hours a day. They were in their cells. And when you're treated, I hate using this term, but if you're treated like an animal,
Mhm.
to me, you're going to get animal behavior. Where
Mhm.
if you treat someone like a human, you're going to get more of a human response.
Mhm.
Outside the fact, obviously, there are psychoses that would, that's brain wiring. But I'm just curious. So, like, let's go back to Bob. I mean, you talked about, he had, you weren't giving him an excuse for some of the choices he made. But do you feel if the family would have rallied around him more, maybe gave
Mhm.
him more support, maybe some of the decisions he made when you're doing your research, maybe he would have gone a different path? And if he had not saying, not to criticize your family by any means, I'm just saying, I mean, we think as family members, I mean, I think I do the best for my kids. I think I'm there for my nieces and nephews, and but I can't be there at all times, and sometimes I've got my own blinders on because I'm worried about my own little world. So I'm just kind of curious, did you ever see anything like that in your research where you're like, hey, this is something for me to learn to be better when I'm with family and friends as well, that could have maybe been a benefit to him?
Yes, yes, I do. Like I said, his rearing, he did not have the best rearing at all. Neither one of his parents stepped up. His father is the one who actually kind of got him into the life of crime, introduced him to these people. His mother, don't even get me started. I think when I go and visit Bob, I think that is why I'm probably hard on him because I
Mhm.
don't think he's ever had one. Now, he's an adult and he knows the difference between right and wrong. I know that. But it's not going to stop me from telling him, you know. If he was going to walk away from the life of crime, I feel like it would have been when he ended up in prison the first time because he violated his probation from the 80s.
Mhm.
Um, and he had written letters, and I have those letters. He'd written them to family members, and I use them in the book. I reference them, and he was asking for help because he was receiving threats by these individuals who paid his bonds. He couldn't get away from them. And he was saying, he had turned the information into the DA to all these people, and he wanted to get out of this life of crime, and he wanted to make some changes. And then he met his then wife, and they got married by proxy. If he had any chance of getting away from that lifestyle, I felt like it would have been then. Now, I don't know if he would have got out of it completely. I don't
Mhm.
know, but I know he was searching. He was trying to. Um, you don't really know I mean, when you're dealing with someone who has the mentality of, the mind of a criminal, you don't know, but these letters to home, I could tell that he wanted out of what he was involved in. He couldn't get out of them.
Yeah, it sounds like he had obviously from his father that modeling behavior too,
Mhm.
to which is so important, which is why I think it's so important for us, as a society to try and model the best of ourselves. Um,
Mm.
because we don't know who's watching and what we're teaching them through our actions, through what we say, what we do. I mean, I fully believe in what we put out into the world is what we're going to receive back, and it may not be I receive it back specifically myself, but it's going to affect me through my kids, through my friends, through my coworkers, through people that I just happen to be walking by on the street, kind of scenario. Um, so yeah, I mean, so I understand that, and I get that. Nick, do you have anything that you want to add
Hmm.
to that?
Well, through it's really powerful stuff. I'll just say that. I don't know if I have a question, but it's powerful stuff. I mean, a theme that, I mean, isn't it fascinating? I will say this. You know how we say whenever we do two episodes back to back, it's fascinating how themes from the morning session, right, recur in the afternoon session.
Right.
So I don't know if you noticed that, but we were talking about redemption, salvation, transformation, and how that happens. It's not some crown in heaven that you get, right? It's
Mhm.
meant to happen during the spiritual journey. So this whole idea of rehabilitation, well, what does that look like? I forget the name of the Dead Man Walking. Have you guys seen that?
I have, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's about obviously they're very invested. I think the nun, right? Who was it? Susan Sarandon?
I
I think so.
believe so. Yes, that
Yeah.
I
sounds.
just remember like, ooh, that's a whole world I'm not familiar with. This idea of redeeming somebody within the prison walls. And I know during my hospital stay, they sent a chaplain. And only later did I realize, oh, I really was in bad shape because they wanted me to get good with God real quick. Right. And so I don't know. I don't think much about rehabilitation, but I guess some of my thoughts throughout were like, there is no bad seed, really. So when you were hinting at what could have interrupted his path along the way, it's just love, right? It's yes, there are chemical imbalances. You could call that a bad seed, and maybe some. But I would also say we inter are, as Rosalind would say, right? So if we're
Mhm.
all interconnected, and it takes a village, like we've been hinting at, it could be generations of trauma or a lack of parenting, like we're hinting at. But somewhere along the way, somebody dropped the ball, and that kid did not get enough love. It's not a bad seed. So I guess I'm walking away with the message that we are all interconnected. It does take a village, and not that anyone did anything wrong, but it's cause and effect. So it's never too late to redeem oneself. I'm with you on that, and I do think the death sentence is not a deterrent. It's never proven, right, statistically to be a deterrent.
Right.
So I don't know what the value of, but I relate to everything you guys said, and I agree. They don't have the life skills to make it in the real world. So many inmates find themselves magically locked behind bars because they don't have the coping skills, the life skills, the confidence, as you hinted at. And so I think it's more than just good job training or how to interview well once you're out. It's counseling, right? And it's spiritual
Mhm.
counseling. Now, that's going to take a huge overhaul, right? To get spiritual counseling in the prison systems. But I do like some of the things that are happening. Like you mentioned the documentary you saw. I love that. There's
Mhm.
one about Shakespeare in the prison system. Have you seen that one, you guys?
I have not seen that one, but that
Beautiful.
sounds very
It's just
interesting.
let's do Shakespeare. And
Mhm.
you see these thugs, right? These full-on gang member thugs get up and do Shakespeare. It's really beautiful. So
Yeah.
more of that. I will say
Yeah.
that.
Well, I say, and talking about fur babies too. I mean, obviously, there's that TV show Pit Bulls and Parolees, and I've only watched a few episodes of that. But let's go onto that and back up a little bit. I mean, I know Pepperan, you've been working to expose the individuals who have sent letters to Bob and have, basically, it sounds like some of the people who have been incarcerated, kind of have feel like they have a foot on their throat because of these individuals who are on the outside.
Hmm.
And it's kind of like, that's the thing. If you think about it, you're going, oh, well, they're incarcerated, they're in prison, they're in jail, they've did this, did that, whatever. And so again, it's that whole, trope of you are in the, black and white jumpsuit with the bar, behind bars, and but they're a victim too, because you have these people who are
Hmm.
trying to extort them. And that is a victimization in itself. And people don't see it that way sometimes.
I will say this. It was important for me when I wrote the book to put the facts out there. I was not trying to, and I'm not trying to sway anyone in one direction or the other. But I've had a lot of people tell me who've read the book, I was on Bob's side and then I was mad at him and I thought he was a victim, but then there were other victims. And I think if you tell the story and if you put the facts in there, people will see that for this specific story, that just because someone's behind bars doesn't mean that they're not at some point in their life a victim.
Right.
I'm not trying to excuse what Bob did. I don't want anyone to think that. I mean,
Right. No,
but
No, but
yeah.
that's what Rosalind, when she went into the inter-R idea, right? And even when it comes to intergenerational trauma, she would talk about, and it's similar to rebuilding. There's a lot of words, right? Redemption, atonement,
Mhm.
repentance. That's how you redeem yourselves. But what does that look like? We don't take the time to say, it's not just going through the motion so you get paroled, feigning, right? Feigning, what's the word? Remorse.
Right.
It's actually true atonement, true repentance. And I think what that is the way Rosalind described it, taking a meta view of the situation. And even again, with intergenerational trauma, I had asked her specifically about reparations. Do you believe certain groups deserve reparations? And she said, if they ask for it, if that's what would be healing for them, then yes, taking responsibility. But what it really looks like is, and we've talked a lot about compassion on this podcast too. Compassion means, yeah, removing all those value judgments you mentioned earlier, right? The ego value judgments, and saying, we've all been colonized. We've all, you know what I mean, had hits and misses in our upbringing, or even society has, I think, fallen short of, in a lot of ways, of raising us as, children of God. And so if you can take that meta view and go, look, yeah, we all have culpability in this mess we've created, it's a little easier to find your compassion and find the shared humanity and forgive. Sorry if I'm talking in general platitudes, but I mean, this is what I'm hearing, right? This is the theme we're talking about. What
Right.
does redemption look like?
No, and
I
that's
think it
what.
just takes acknowledging that we're all interconnected, and that what I do does, there's the ripple effect. It just does have an effect.
No,
I was
that's.
going I was going to say that it is a ripple effect.
Mm,
Everything we do has a ripple effect.
mm, mhm.
And we don't know, and just like, you were saying, Virginia, that we have to be more aware of what we're saying and doing because we don't know who is seeing and listening, watching what we're doing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah.
it's true. And we, that's one of the things, like, so there's obviously been studies done on it about operational conditioning. And I think that's kind of what we see within the prison system. There's actually a study called the Stanford Project, and they recreated in the basement of the psychology department. And I want to say this was like in the 70s ish. I may have the dates wrong. I don't think it was quite the 80s. Um, but they had, I can't remember how many, I think it was 24 students. 12 were dressed up to be prison guards, and they wore like glasses, sunglasses so you couldn't see their eyes. So it made them basically kind of like robotic, non-human to
Mm, mhm.
the 12 students who were considered the inmates in the makeshift jail. And because there was that sense of, my gosh, what word am I looking for? Where um immunity, because they had the sunglasses on, so they had, it's kind of like how we are with computers now, you're behind the screen,
Mm.
therefore you can let the darker parts of your psyche kind of manifest, or
Yeah.
your more judgmental consciousness come
We lose our
forward.
interconnectivity and our humanity, right? And there's more
Exactly.
isolation, and you're not responsible for what you're contributing to the collective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing happens, going outside of the prison system, outside the jail system, when you're looking at crime in general, it's kind of that same thing. It's why, gangs give you, if you don't have a sense of family, they give you that sense of family, but it also gives you that protective
Yeah, I was
circle
going to say
too.
safety and protection. Yeah.
Exactly. So you kind of get into that model behavior, but that operational conditioning, because you're like, I must do these things to get this reward.
Hmm.
Because I mean, we are wired as humans. At least I feel, and I don't know if you've discovered this, Pepperan, in, talking to Bob, talking to the other inmates that escaped. Maybe you even noticed this when you're talking to some of the victims as well, but there's definitely that whole, you know, we're all looking for that pat on the back, be it monetary, be it emotional, whatever it is. We are wired for that approval, that reward
Mm-hmm.
system in many ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Mhm.
It makes perfect sense. You know, I think that, and I can't speak for everyone because I don't know their situation, but
Mhm.
just from the individuals I've spoken with who are incarcerated, I think they are looking for survival. They're trying to find how to survive in their environment where they're at.
Mhm.
They never really were taught that. And like you said, then they're looking for um, recognition
Mm-hmm.
for what they've done, for the good, and they don't get it as much. I mean, because it's prison. I mean, come on, you're not going to find that
Right.
like you're thinking, and compared to the real world. So I think that it's sad. I think it's sad. I think that we as human beings can do better. Um, I just think we can. I think on
I
the
love
inside
what.
and outside, we need to do better.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was saying, and Pepper, and you just hit on, and Dominick's gonna laugh, but when you're talking about, it's about survival and things, so it goes right to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those basic
Mm-hmm.
survival things. I know you're gonna laugh because we just talked about this in a past podcast, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't want to get onto that, but you know, even though there's different theories of thoughts on Maslow's hierarchy of needs currently, the reality is you do need to have shelter. You do need
Yeah.
food.
Mm-hmm.
We know this. Like if you don't have food, you don't have water, you don't have shelter. Physically, you are
Yes.
not going to survive.
I was in self actualization is a luxury if your base needs aren't met.
Yeah.
So the last thing on a lot of people's mind is emotional maturity, spiritual evolution. Like what? I'm just trying to keep a roof over my head and food on the
Hmm.
table. But what I've been hearing too a lot is, desperation makes people do crazy things. So we hope, right? If your mama raised you right and you have morals and ethics, that can last a lifetime. Not necessarily so. At any point, if your needs aren't met, despair can kick in, right? We hope you have a moral fiber. But that's more and more on my radar, and I don't want to say too much, but disenfranchisement came to mind as well. When
Hmm.
we're disenfranchised from the whole of humanity, from community, we don't have that gang or that church or that family that's inclusive. We feel disenfranchised. We feel isolated. There's no interconnectivity. That's when the fun begins, right?
Right. Well, and I want to say,
And
and
yes,
I want to say that's probably where we see a lot of our own kind of breakdown to the norms of society and what we view as right and wrong at that
well,
point.
that's why I loved hearing that one. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Pepper Ann, but one of the programs was to give them responsibility to the collective, to the community. Of course, that's the answer. Baby steps, right? But
Mhm.
we're more, I mean, even when it comes to just contentment, tranquility, inner peace, the answer is serving, whether that's one dog, right? Whether
Mhm.
that's the love of your life, whether that's your grassroots community, friends, and family. If you're not contributing to a collective, isolation is just the beginning of the end. So, yeah, I think all of those things are interconnected, and we've talked a lot about them today. But I guess part of me wants to say I feel like I'm biting my tongue on this one. Again, we're none of us are judging one another. It's just that compassion is taking a meta view, seeing that we're all faulted, seeing that there is the ripple effect and it's alive and well. So, as a gay man, I'm the family member that nobody talks about. There you go. I have exhibited a lot of patience. I hear my sister talking to her husband about, oh, the weird, the weird kid in that family that they don't talk about. I'm sitting here going, well, of course he's the gay one. But who knows? Who knows? But there are family members we just don't talk about. That's called disenfranchisement. So somebody a long time ago should have started talking about him. I'll leave it at that. Enough of the weird uncle that nobody talks about. That's how they become criminals, by the way.
I couldn't agree with you more. When I found out about Bob and I said, we need to know the story, once I started talking and I discovered the story, my family rallied around me and him, and they said, you got to tell the story. And they reached out
I
to him.
love that. Yeah.
But it's a shame that it didn't happen before now. And I agree with you more.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying not to blame people, but if he didn't get the parenting, and another word for it as the love he needed, then, you can't take responsibility for that. But I don't think it's ever too late. That's what we're saying. Maybe redemption, you know what I mean? We all stand a chance at redeeming ourselves, whether it's on our deathbed or, to be paroled. Who knows? I think sometimes, like, I have a family member that went to court-ordered AA. And they say you have to be ready for it. You can't do it for your partner. You just have to either hit bottom and have that dark night of the soul and want it for yourself. Usually court-ordered AA just doesn't work. But I also think the reason doesn't matter as long as you do the work on yourself. So I don't know. I think we're all just kind of saying maybe it's never too late to redeem yourself. And for sure, the prison systems need to start instituting things like, you know what I mean? The small communities they're creating, having a responsibility to that small community. And that's how you gain the confidence to then survive in the real world once you're paroled.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And I think, sometimes, that rock bottom for all of us is different. I mean, some people it's just having a loved one, or, and when I say loved one, I don't mean just has to be a family member, just somebody that you love and respect, saying, hey, stop that. And
Intervention.
Exactly. And then exactly that intervention. And I mean, it could be, something simple like, I'll just, I'll use a mother analogy, but, kids basically, spill milk, you go batshit crazy on them. And then like your spouse turns to you like, did you really need to like, scream at them like a banshee?
Oh, like
You're
holding you accountable. Basically.
Yeah. So, hold you accountable. So yeah. So, or an actual intervention as, like the TV show, or, unfortunately, sometimes, like you said, it has to be court ordered, or you, unfortunately, the cops show up and you're being handcuffed and you're getting your lovely, booking photo. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I think those are the hard checks of reality that help snap us into, are we ready now to, like we talked about in with our last guest, basically face that darker side of ourselves, our psyche, and go, no, change needs to happen. What is going to be that transformation in me? And yeah, I guess it's different for everybody. And unfortunately, this is,
Well, and when you say that, what comes to mind for me is I've heard, because I used to watch the Dr. Drew, I forget the name of it, but the rehab in Pasadena. It was a reality show with Dr. Drew from Loveline, and it was really eye-opening and educational for me about how rehab works. And I just had so much respect for those nurses, right? For just having a thick skin, but also compassion. It's like salt of the earth. So I learned a lot by watching it, but you hear that conventional wisdom that, yeah, you have to hit bottom. You have to want it for yourself and be ready. You can't do it for the courts. You can't do it but I also hold this idea that, you know what, if one person hangs in there and believes in you and doesn't give up on you and doesn't abandon you, that can mean everything, right? Even like when it comes to suicide, what if one person just championed you? And so I don't know, I hold both beliefs. So you're right. It looks different on different people.
Yeah, no, and I think it takes both. I think you have to be one ready to receive it, and I think the other is, hopefully
Support.
there's somebody there willing to put their hand out and say, "Let me be here for you to fall on."
Right.
So,
Pepperan, do you feel like your novel? I mean, is this unrelated, or do you feel like these themes. I know you said you wrote it without an outcome in mind, but you've also gotten feedback from people. So is this relevant? Does some of this come up for people like, hey, are we redeemable? Are there bad seeds? What went wrong in this equation?
I feel this is very relevant. Yes. When I'll tell you an instance with Bob, and there are others that this happened with as well. There was at one of the visits, I had told Bob, I said, do not give them any problem. And I got it from the visit, and the guards, they were just wonderful with me. One of the guards said, we don't ever have any problems with Bob. And when he said that to me, I felt like I wanted to cry. I thought he he is if given compassion, he's not the way that everyone views him all the time. There is a chance for redemption. But when Bob heard that, and I thought I was just going to melt into the floor. I looked at Bob and he had tears in his eyes. I probably shouldn't be sharing that, but I am. I believe that everyone deserves compassion. And I think that there is a chance for change. Now, not everyone can change. They have to want to be ready to change. But I've seen this so much. I've seen it with the victims. I'm just amazed that the victims are the ones who were trying to convince me, hey, give this person a chance. I mean, and
I've seen that a lot where I'll see somebody talking about forgiving somebody that murdered their family member. And I'm like, holy crap, that is beautiful. I don't know if I could do that, but I feel like you rise to the occasion. If you have, I don't know, I guess everybody's wired differently, but I think it's almost like the stakes are higher, so you have to forgive to survive, and so you find that within yourself. But I wanted to ask a question. Shoot, I lost it. I guess the other thing that's coming to mind for me a little bit is, did either of you ever see the movie The Music Box? Did I ask that yet? The Music Box.
They have not asked that yet, but I have seen it.
Was it Jessica Lange? Who is the lead in that?
Of course, you're going to ask that. Who's in
Okay,
it?
I don't know.
I
haven't seen it.
It's been a while.
Do you remember the premise, Virginia?
Vaguely, because it's been a while, and I've it's one of those things like I'd have to start seeing the opening of it, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I remember now, which is terrible.
Pepper Ann, you might be interested in it. Is it Pepper, or should I be calling you by Pepper Ann?
You can call me Pepper Ann, whatever you want. Hey, you can call me whatever you want.
Just not late for dinner.
That's right.
Well, anyway, I'll try to put it simply. It's kind of like you, somebody that wasn't aware of a family member's involvement in something until she was asked to defend. She was a lawyer, and she was asked to defend her father for being a war criminal in World War II. And she found, and I think it's based on a true story, but she finds out, of course, all the bad blood that's coursing through her veins. And so I often write about bad blood, right? How do we cleanse ourselves of the sins of the father, right? I write about that a lot. And so what did that feel like for you when you realized a family member was involved in some shady dealings, right? And then did you cleanse yourself by writing the novel, or did you just slough that off immediately and go, that's not in my DNA, it doesn't reflect on me, that sort of thing?
I was angry when I found out everything that he'd done. Owned up to it because it's family. And to me, it did feel like a cleansing. Like I said, I felt like I healed too, even though I wasn't there when all of these events happened, didn't even know about them. To me, it was an acceptance. It was okay, this happened. Now let's deal with this head on. You can't deny your family tree. I mean, why would you do that? You have family. You gotta love them, even if you don't like them. You gotta love them.
No, that's true. It's kind of like what I was talking about. At the beginning, you're telling your family's legacy, good, bad, or indifferent, and it's easy to whitewash things, but the reality is we, it doesn't mean we have to like it, but we need to be cognitively aware that those things are there, that we're not perfect. Our family isn't perfect.
Yeah, that's kind of with the intergenerational trauma, what I meant.
Yeah.
Like accountability is the beginning of atonement and redemption.
Mhm.
I love Finding Your Roots. Do you guys ever watch that?
I have not.
I haven't watched it. I've been stuck on doing research and writing. I'm probably the worst person to
Well,
ask.
it's called Finding Your Roots, and I think there's another one like Who Do You Think You Are is what it used to be called. And it's
Uh,
just about, even before 23andMe or ancestry.com, they had all the resources to look into your family tree on your behalf. And literally to the point of flying you to a little library in the UK to go through the microfiche. Like they had resources the normal person didn't have. Now I know ancestry.com and whatever I just said, they do it for you. But it's a great documentary because you will literally, and it's usually celebrities, but they'll spring it on them like, "Hey, Gwyneth Paltrow, did you know your grandpa was a slave owner?"
Actually, I did see something on television about Valerie Bertinelli, and she
Hmm.
was finding out about her past. I'm wondering if that might have been a little snippet of what I caught of that
Probably.
show.
Yeah, it's really
Um,
beautiful because
yeah.
sometimes they feel really haunted by, right, their family tree. And then
Mhm.
Sammy Hagar was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I would have expected. He's like, and it wasn't slavery in that case, but it was like
Yeah.
his grandpa was a wife beater or something. He's like, yep. I kind of like when they just let it roll off. Like, okay, we're
It's
good.
just natural. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
yeah.
So yeah, that's a tricky one. And then if I could, since you invited me on Virginia, I have
Yeah.
been just fascinated throughout, and I'm just listening and learning. But one thing that keeps going through my head too, and then for our listeners, because we do have a lot of writers who do find their catharsis by speaking their truth or telling their story, which I know you relate to, and you're doing it against really great odds. So for the writers among us that do go out on a limb and tell our stories when sometimes it's not rewarded, right? I'm just going to quickly say in third grade, I read something called Harriet the Spy. Were you forced to read that?
Yes.
I wasn't forced. I loved it. So
Okay. Well, I just remember it stuck with me and I thought, ooh, that's the risk you take when you keep a journal. But then you could extend that to being a writer. You could hurt people. It's a lot of responsibility. It's like sort of a sword that you wield for good or evil, right? And you can definitely hurt people. So then you have the Tatum O'Neills of the world writing tell-all books, and you have Mommy Dearest, and that's been on my mind too because I'm watching Feud about Joan and Bette Midler. I mean Bette Midler, Bette Davis, Betty
Mhm.
Davis, and people's entire legacy, right, can be destroyed by somebody writing a tell-all book. So I just know there's responsibility even for us fiction writers, right? When you fabricate a character, but you're drawing on life, is somebody out there going to see themselves in your character? This is something we all deal with. But also, I think most writers strive to tell the good and the bad and the ugly, and only then have you fully found your voice as a writer. This is, we're all somewhere on this gamut, I think. So, could you talk to that a little bit? You obviously took great risks to tell this story. You're very fortunate you got a lot of support from your family. Has there been backlash? Have you had to find strength in the face of that backlash? And then if you could tell the story about getting your book into all the libraries, I really loved that story.
well, I have had a lot of backlash. In fact, I'm still receiving it today. For me, it was important to be able to, let me just say, I have a literary attorney, and that was one of the first individuals I had to get on board with me. I had to have an editor and a literary
In
attorney, and
case
I
of
wanted,
people that felt they were slandered, that sort of thing, or what footing would they have legally?
well, I was going to be listing people's names
Mhm.
and things that they had done. And I needed to make sure that I was protected legally with my
Mhm.
work. So that was the first step I took
Mhm.
before even attempting to write anything, because I wanted to know what I was allowed to write and not write.
Mhm.
Everything I've written is public information. People can find it or they can talk to people. So um, I am receiving a lot of backlash from the people that I've exposed. They are attempting to reach out to me, and I have to forward that to my legal team. I have people who show up at events trying to intimidate me. I'm talking book signings or programs or things such as that.
Mhm.
I just have to be careful about how I do it. Um, anytime you write about someone, you have to be careful what you say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, the reason it was important to me to put their names is because they've been protected for so long. And if we're going to
Mm-hmm.
tell the story and expose them, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was why I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to tell it the way it is. So
Yeah,
yeah,
beautiful. It's great for us to learn from because,
Mm.
again, I think we all are somewhere, but the stakes are not nearly as high as yours. So I do know I've certain family members. Well, one family member found a story I wrote that was, I think, very humorous. If you have a sense of humor about our family, it's other people find it funny. But if you feel implicated, right? I'm the devil. So I have one aunt that kind of disowned me after she found one of my stories on Amazon. And that was not fun, but I did think if she had a slightly better sense of humor, she would have received it like everybody else. But it wasn't, it was painful. And so I think a lot of us writers, I mean, I've now taken to going, prefacing myself and going, all right, Sister Tina, if you do read this, just know there's so much love in this story, and get the message of the story without getting hung up on your version of events is different than mine. David Sedaris, every story he writes, he risks alienating some new family member. But if we're all adults about it, yes, you're going to perceive events through your lens. I'm going to, right, experience them through mine, and our recollections are going to be completely different. But isn't it? It's the intention that matters, I think, with loved ones. If there's love in it, then have a sense of humor. Am I making any sense?
yeah, you absolutely are. And I want to say about that, that's why it was so important for me to write using the words of the people I spoke
Mm,
with. And that, because I wanted their view of the
mhm.
way everything played out to come in
Absolutely.
to my
Yeah.
writing. So
Mhm.
my opinion is in there.
Well, there's no way around that. The words
Right,
you choose editorially are going to have a point of view. There's no way around it. But I
right.
like that you honor the facts as
Yeah.
right as delivered by the source.
Yeah, it gave them a voice, which is so
Mm,
important, not just for yourself and, understanding the story and of course finding peace with this being part of your family history, but also for them to have that, healing catharsis, as well.
yeah, tell the stories of the silenced and invisible, right? And
Mhm.
those that don't have the luxury, right, of telling
Right.
their stories. Really beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was important for me to do that in the way that I did it because you have to remember, I'm related to Bob, and I didn't want people to think that I was defending him because I was not. I just wanted to get the facts out there, and I thought the only way to do that would be to include all those people. You have to do that. It's their
Mhm.
story. Um,
No, and that's
yeah,
amazing and not an easy thing to do. And
yeah.
so it's great that you saw that, you understood that, and you were, at peace with that, because, a lot of people, again, like to hide stuff. I think as a society we're getting better about not whitewashing things. We're realizing we have to face reality, no matter if it's directly,
I feel like
impact.
it's been a sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
I
you're
feel like
fine.
it's been a steady arc from like the
Hmm.
80s when we started, instead of sweeping things under the rug, we started actually putting them under a microscope on
Yeah.
Oprah and Donahue and Jenny
Hmm.
Jones. And so we started, alcoholism, domestic abuse, even incest. Like, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
And now maybe we've gone too far because airing one's dirty laundry publicly is very rewarded right now, right? Under the guise of, hey, look at, I'm going to open my veins for you, but it's distasteful to some.
Hmm.
I feel like we're going to find a balance when we can speak the truth about individuals and society and human nature without canceling people.
Hmm. No,
Do you
I
know what I
I
mean?
agree. Yeah, I agree. Well, I kind of feel like that's what I think you've tried to attempt to do, Pep Brown, by giving voices to those victims. So it's like, yes, you're shining, for lack of a better term, light into like the dark corners of, you know, this story, but at the same time, you're not trying to overdo it, I guess, is how, at least how I feel in talking with you today. I mean, I don't, if that makes sense. But yeah, I agree with you, Dominic, that yeah, sometimes we do overdo it, and we do have to have that balance. There's always that counterbalance to everything we do, right?
Yeah. Yeah, let's speak the truth with compassion, maybe, and then you don't have to cancel people or
Yeah.
revise history and do that sort of wishful thinking version. I don't know if that made sense, but something in there, I think you hinted that we're more willing to tell the truth nowadays, right? Instead of wearing those blinders that we call denial culturally. So that's
Mhm.
why I went off on that tangent. Anyway, that's all I've got to say, Virginia.
Yeah, no, I
Thanks.
was, I'm glad you interjected, because I know for a while you were listening and stuff,
It's
and
fascinating, and I was
yeah.
really just like, oh my god, I now I relate to you, Virginia, kind of in the wings listening, because it's addictive, and like, what could I possibly say? I'm glad I got to share some of the thoughts that went on my mind, but I was really focused on just because, like I said, I'm the disenfranchised one that nobody talks about. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I've just always been aware of the weird uncle, because I'm like, yeah, I relate to that. No, and even if it's just around my sexuality, or my lovers that come to every Christmas, Thanksgiving, but it's just not talked about. That is another version of being silenced. You're great as long as you're invisible, and just don't tell us about, or that whole thing. It's what you do in the bedroom. It's not who you are. And so I just often see, like, again, with an in-law, like, why don't they talk about him? Was he a cattle rustler or a homosexual? Like, which is it? So it's just very much on my radar. So I felt like I wanted to address that bad seed idea versus just not getting that love. And then I just kept hearing this theme of interconnectivity and what happens when we're disenfranchised, and then the rehabilitation is related to that, the kind of rehabilitation we can improve in our prison systems. But anyway, I was fascinated. That's why I didn't jump in. I was just listening and learning. And then when you invited me in, Virginia, it was like, okay.
I do after I figured you were thinking. I
Yeah,
knew.
totally.
I knew you were, but no,
But the
it's been
Harriet the Spy thing was on my mind the whole time as well, because I know a lot of our listeners are writers. So I
yeah.
just kept thinking about the responsibility that comes with speaking your truth. And you took huge risks to do that. So I will just say, even though you were trying to do just the facts, ma'am, and kind of give a megaphone to the voices and tell their stories, it still took a lot of courage, and it's very admirable.
Thank you. Thank you. I do want to say this. When I started uncovering everything and learning more about Bob, and I was telling my family about it, I'm talking about cousins and aunts and uncles and everyone, they would ask questions and they said, well, what did he do? They didn't have the clear picture. And
Mm,
so I was able to tell them the story
mm,
once they realized, hey, they knew that he was involved in criminal activity, but they didn't know the extent. They
mm,
didn't know. So I think that was important. But to me, that was when I realized that Bob even seemed to open up when he realized he had family he didn't know about. And
mm,
for me, that was a little bit of a healing for
mm,
me. That
Mhm.
was really huge. But thank you. I appreciate that
mhm.
compliment. You asked about the libraries.
Yeah.
So
Better late
so
than never. Yes, we would love to hear that.
so I'm an indie author, and I have to promote my book any way I can. And so I told my PA, Laura, I said, okay, we got to get this book out there. So I looked up every library in every state in the United States. And I got their email and their phone numbers. And the ones I could email, I did. Ones I could call, I did, and I contacted them and I told them about my book because they have a budget they're allowed to spend on books. And so I told them about my book. And I wasn't giving them away because, I didn't, you could just, you want to try to sell it so you can, get something back.
Mhm.
Um, and so I did, and I asked him, and I got a lot of no's, but I got a lot of yeses. And because I did that, there was one night I think I emailed 50 libraries, and the next morning Laura got up and said, "Oh my God, what are you doing? You're contacting every library in the world." Um, and that's how I got my book out there. It was
Amazing.
just hitting the pavement, libraries and gift
Persistence.
shops
Yeah,
in the hospital. Yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
it's important to me to get the story out there, and I wanted to do that. So,
Yeah.
I love it. Well, on that idea of getting the story out there, a minute ago when you said some family members didn't know all the facts,
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's why we don't talk about those invisible family members, is because we fill in those gaps with innuendo sometimes, and the silence speaks more, right, than the truth.
That's
I
right.
think we project on those little hiccups, like those little gaps in the information. So when you complete the picture, then nobody needs to speculate and either augment it or diminish it and minimize it, if that makes sense.
Well, that's why information, the facts are so important.
Mhm.
People assume things, and
Exactly. Yeah.
that's where we're going wrong. We're going in a different direction. People
Yep.
need to, like I said, we need to just do better.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
in
Do better,
everything.
folks.
That's
Right.
right. Yeah.
Let's all do better.
No, I think that's
It's a bumper sticker, right?
Yeah.
Do better. Well, no, then it sounds like Melania Trump. Be best. Be best. But at least ours is proper English, right?
That's right.
Do
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you'd like our listeners to know about you, your book, what you'd like to impart on them, aspiring people who have stories to tell that, we're like, I don't know if I can do this, but look, this, Pepper Ann's doing it, so maybe I can.
One of the most important things I always tell people is it takes more than an author to write a book. And it does. I had a lot of people in my corner, and my PA, my editor, my literary attorney. Not everyone needs an attorney, because if you're writing fiction, you probably don't need that. But just remember that you can do this. If you have a dream or passion to write, you can do it. Just shove those thoughts out of your mind that you can't do it, and just go for it. What's it going to hurt to see your dream come to life? Or maybe it'll open a door for something else. But if you're wanting to write, just remember, have the right people in your corner. Get those professionals on your team to help you, because it takes more than an author to write a story. It really does. Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I don't really have anything else unless you do, Dominic.
I think we're good. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Very inspiring.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both for inviting me to be on the show. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. Well, and for our listeners, remember, life is story, and we can get our hands in the clay. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. See you next time.